given the confidence that he's got, all of a sudden he has to play as the 9.
Is it a case of Chelsea's depth not being strong enough to win these kind of games?
But his confidence, it seems to be so up and down.
Hello and welcome back to the Chelsea Blueprint. It's Monday, so it's Chelsea Blueprint Day. I'm joined for this episode by Chelsea correspondent Dan King and broadcaster Sam Parkin. How are you both getting on?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good weekend?
Yeah, can't complain. Nice Sunday off.
Yeah.
Sunday roast, all good.
Sam?
Very good.
Weekend,
Yeah, great weekend of football, wasn't it? A couple of comebacks, which we're going to get onto in a minute. But yeah, really enjoyed it.
Sam, as you mentioned, a couple of huge comebacks for Chelsea this week. I actually spent the last week in Qatar, did an interview with Eden Hazard, which you can watch on our YouTube shorts. But I was still watching the games, never fear. I was still keeping up to date with Chelsea, watching the games against Napoli and West Ham. We're going to start with that comeback tendency that Liam Rosenior seems to have built at Chelsea. Something Maresca struggled with, almost had the opposite problem, losing games from winning positions, and Liam Rosenior has really come in and made comebacks a bit of a thing in his time at Chelsea so far. What do you think of the game yesterday?
Well, amazing outcome. Two hugely contrasting halves. Really below par in the first half, and then as good as I've seen them in the second half in terms of, I think, intensity. When the ball was going out of play, the speed in which it was coming back in, corners, throw-ins, they just ran all over West Ham, and it's not something that we've seen too often. And I think it afforded the luxury of being really attacking because you were chasing a deficit. So it's probably not an 11 we're going to invariably see from the off, but I think circumstances led to him being really bold with not only his substitutions but also the approach, I think, in the second half. So yeah, a brilliant second half performance, and obviously a lot of food for thought ahead of another massive game on Tuesday at Arsenal.
Exactly. That's been the biggest thing, really. The biggest thing that I took from the West Ham game was the team selection and the substitutions. That's been the main kind of talking point, because he's obviously putting out against West Ham a slightly weaker team with the likes of Joao Pedro on the bench, Liam Delap starting up front. And then he's made the substitutions, and Chelsea have obviously turned it around incredibly. Joao Pedro at the heart of that with a goal and assist. Is it a case of Chelsea's depth not being strong enough to win these kind of games, and that he's needing to call that in and call in the big guns, so to speak, from the bench? And is that a real problem for Chelsea kind of going forwards?
Not sure. It's a problem when you're trying to manage a squad through 4 competitions as he is, and the complaint under Maresca was he kept making too many changes, and I just felt that one of the points that Rosenior made in the build-up to the game was, I want to see more consistency, and that's why the West Ham game for him was huge. It's all very well to win in Naples, but can you still do it 3 days later at home? Can you put these back-to-back results together? And the evidence of the first half was, no, you can't. But one of the reasons is it's fine to change 4 or 5, but to change 7 and expect a consistency, I think is hard. And then at the same time, there are definitely some tactical tweaks that he made as well. But I don't think, and Rosenior wouldn't claim to be a coaching genius himself. You're 2-0 down at half-time, and your left side has been torn to pieces by Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Jarrod Bowen in the first half. Then you do make 3 changes chasing the game. And the players he took off were left centre back, left back, and left wing. And whatever you say about, I think it was probably a bit harsh on Harter and maybe a bit harsh on Badiashile, because they were left horribly exposed by Garnacho. But I think we need to be a little bit circumspect about saying, this is just because the substitutes all scored. He had to do that, otherwise they're going to lose to West Ham after beating Naples, and that would have looked really, really bad. But I think it's very similar thing to what we saw under Maresca, is that if you make too many changes, it affects the level too much, even against a team who are struggling like West Ham.
Yeah, well, there was a big thing. We had Nina on last week, who was brilliant, and she went viral a few months ago when Chelsea were playing Barcelona, that she was more afraid of the Chelsea playing against the smaller teams than she was against the likes of Barcelona and Arsenal, because Chelsea have, at least under Maresca, they kind of came up big against the big clubs, the Champions League games, and against the big teams. And then when it would come to your West Hams, your Wolves, your Leeds, they would then struggle. It was almost a case of, do they have the mentality to get up for the smaller games as well as the massive ties at Stamford Bridge. Is that something that you can see Rosenior really working on, is the mentality of the team to go out and win a run of games as they have? It's six in a row now, as opposed to just showing up for the big occasions?
Yeah, I don't think West Ham at home would fall into that category, though. That's always a big game, and Liam Rosenior would know that, and the players would know that. I think Dan touched on it there. Yeah, changing wholesale was an issue and a big part of it, I think, but also the shape, the tactics in the first half. I just thought overcomplicated it. We knew how West Ham were going to come because of the way they were superb in beating Sunderland. We knew the way they were going to set up, and to invert Hatto, for example, complicated it. And I just felt that obviously Badiashile was kind of left side of that three and build up, got exposed as well. I just think in the second half it was Chelsea's give or take best 11 that was available in their preferred positions, and that's going to beat West Ham 9 times out of 10. So I think in the first half, with retrospect, there was a little bit of confusion there as well. This is a new coach. They're playing a similar way to they were under Maresca, but I'd be very surprised if we see that for Tuesday. And I know that Cucurella and Gusto have done it well at times, coming in and clogging up the midfield. And in the second half, they actually were coming in field, but really high and getting in the box. And that's where Cucurella's goal comes from. And I haven't got a problem with Gusto or Cucurella doing that. I just think putting Hatto in there in that game in the first half, and he's a nice footballer, but I just think it was overcomplicated when you take into consideration what West Ham are currently. In the second half, ran all over them, and it was a brilliant recovery, but maybe that could be avoided in future with the setup from the off. But game plans are not always perfect. It's hard because you're trying to preempt what they're going to do, and my very, very limited experience of standing on a touchline, that's where they earn their money, the coaches. It's spotting things in game and changing. And in the 40th minute, give or take, the notepad was out, the pen was out, and he was determined to make amends, and he made those 3 changes.
He was talking to the 3 players he's going to bring on before half time. I think you make a similar point with these sort of comebacks and the sending the cavalry on, sending the best players on to rescue games. It's a little bit like Liverpool at the start of the season, where Liverpool were getting all these late goals, and by the skin. Everyone say, they're going to win the league by a streak. They're winning. That's fine. But I think, again, although Chelsea controlled the second half, Fernandes doesn't score to the second minute of stoppage time. So you're a hair's breadth from following up a great win in Naples with a home draw against West Ham, which would damage your chances of being back in the Champions League next season. So those sort of margins, that sort of, it's not luck that they score, because they deserve to score, but sometimes that's not going to go for you, and you can't keep afford to having to recover games like that. You need to. I think all Chelsea fans, I'm sure, would like to see Chelsea control more games from start to finish, which they haven't really done very much. Maybe the Liverpool game maybe is one example, and Barcelona, albeit with the assistance of the red card, is probably the other.
Yeah, there's 2 players I want to really focus on from this game. One for positive reasons and one for not so positive reasons. That is Joao Pedro and Alejandro Garnacho. So to start on the positive with Joao Pedro, he of late has been in incredible form. Obviously, this week for him was brilliant with goals against Napoli and West Ham. He's really building up a run of steam. Do you think, Sam, Joao Pedro can be the striker that Chelsea need? Obviously, he's been kind of competing with Delap, and of late, Delap, for me personally, has just not been good enough to be justifying a position in the team from the start. Obviously, Rosenior needs to rotate, and the same with Maresca. He had to rotate the pair of them. But I think for me, Joao Pedro's got to be starting week in, week out. I think he's been the best signing probably of the summer in terms of big forwards coming in to the Premier League. Obviously, he came from Brighton, but the likes of Isak, Ekitike, Voltemada, I think he's at the top of that list. How good is he, and do you think he will start going forwards? Yeah,
well, I think given the confidence that he's got, all of a sudden he has to play as the 9 at the moment. And I think it's a little bit risky in the big games probably to go with him as the 10 and Delap as the 9. I think that he's got all the attributes really to be a top Premier League striker, and I think I've said that across this season, even during the dip of the autumn. Was it late autumn, early winter, where he'd definitely fallen off to a degree after starting so fast. He needs to trust a little bit more that he can be the one that gets him behind, because he can shift when he gets going, and I think his strong suit is coming to the ball and taking it in. He's a lovely footballer, he's got a load of guile about his game, so we know he can do that. He's got that velvety touch when he comes off, but he's got to be able to trust that he can stretch the game as well, especially if you've only really got Neto maybe as the other outlet in terms of pace. But no, I really like him, and I speak to Glenn Murray and Troy Deeney, another former striker, former teammates of his. They talk so highly of him, but I trust those two's judgment. I think Glenn Murray gave him man of the match in the Palace victory the other day, which I was like, I knew I was onto him, as those two are former teammates. But I trust those two, and they say he's got absolutely everything. So to be adding the goals now, and the array of goals as well, the scrappy nature of the one at the weekend, I suppose the awareness when the ball was travelling what was required, he positioned himself intelligently, and then the goal at Napoli. I mean, on his weaker side, that's as good a strike you're going to see from the most left-footed of players to arrow it into the top corner. So I didn't think he had that in his armoury. So he's improving week after week, and it's no mean return already, the amount of goals he's got.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, Dan, will come to you on this one. It's Alejandro Garnacho. He's been a bit hit and miss for me in his time so far at Chelsea, but probably more misses than hits, and his dribbling in the first half was quite something.
It has been weird, and he's been one of those players actually who's made better impact coming off the bench. For instance, in the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final, but not just there. In other games, some of his best work has been done as a substitute. But his confidence, it seems to be so up and down. From the very start on Saturday, he seemed really reluctant to try and take on his man on the outside. It was like watching Jack Grealish from Man City. So we know what he's going to do here. He's going to turn back inside, lay it inside, and move the ball around. He was not producing much attacking wise, and he was losing the ball a lot. But then also he was leaving Badiashile and Hato exposed. And as Sam says, the fact that Hato is still being asked to step into the midfield, leaving that flank open. But for the first goal, he loses a tackle with Wan-Bissaka, and then he doesn't go back and deal with Bowen well enough. Compare and contrast Jared Bowen, who was, along with Wan-Bissaka, West Ham's big threat through the whole of that first half. But the work that Jared Bowen also got through in that first half, in his own defensive third, and compare that to what Garnacho was doing, basically playing the same position, the same formation, albeit on the opposite flank. It really showed Garnacho up, and it seems to be sort of one step forward, two steps back with him at the moment.
Do you think the wing is still Chelsea's, left wing in particular, still Chelsea's weakest position? Because they spent 90 million in the summer. They're about to get rid of Tyreek George, who obviously came through the academy, had a fairly decent season last season. Spent 90 million. Still maybe their weakest position. Yeah,
I was going to say it's catching, isn't it? Because last season we were bemoaning the impact of the wide left players. I think that's been a reoccurring theme. Jadon Sancho, I'm thinking of this season. Gittins and Garnacho have underachieved the amount of game time they've been given. I felt for him. I think it's difficult not to when you're seeing a player have such a terrible half. I've been there, and there was probably a degree of relief when he was taken off. I think he had to be taken off, and it's going to be a test of the manager and his coaching staff actually to try and reinvigorate him and his confidence level. So I'd be very surprised if he's not been in the office at some point of today, because that's going to be, I don't think there's any point in Liam Rosenior saying you were terrible at the weekend, you did this awful. He needs to build him up and probably cherry pick the next opportunity to give him some minutes, and he's going to need his teammates, and he's going to need the supporters as well. So hopefully if he can get an opportunity against maybe a lesser light in the Premier League in the weeks ahead, he can rebuild his Chelsea career, because giving the ball away, you can always forgive that as a teammate. It's the not running back, which is unforgivable. So I'm sure if there were some harsh words at half-time, it would have been about that. And on the training ground this week, of course, I can understand if Caicedo, Reece James, whoever wants to speak to Garnacho and say, you need to give us a little bit more without the ball. But in terms of the position, I think you're bang on. And at the moment, Neto has to play there, because you've got two great options on the right-hand side. Not albeit ones that want to hug the touchline, but in Esteval and Palmer, those two can battle it out for that role. If Palmer's not playing centrally, and Neto has been, despite a drop-off recently, getting goals and getting assists.
You mentioned there's been two very different halves in that game against West Ham, and I wonder if we'll see, coming on to the Arsenal game, a very different second leg to the tie. Chelsea obviously travelling to the Emirates, lost 3-2 at home at Stamford Bridge. Do you see this being a similar tie to the first leg, or will Chelsea have a very different approach?
Probably to contradict myself, this probably isn't a game to go out fully open and attack minded. I think there has to be a degree of a bit of a conservative nature about the approach initially, and stay in the game. Basically, there's only a 1-goal deficit to chase. So you can't start as you finished the other day. Well, I would be very, very surprised unless you're tactically tweaking an enormous amount to make yourself defensively more solid. So we'll wait and see how it looks. He certainly had a lot to think about given the second half against West Ham. But I think you go out and you try and stay in the tie. And they showed at Stamford Bridge that they can be got at. I thought the right-hand side, actually, it was a Champong and Esteval, if memory serves, caused Arsenal all manner of problems in the first half. A couple of goals from balls into the box where they didn't cover themselves in glory. Hopefully Kepa's in the sticks again for the second leg, and maybe can profit in that regard. But obviously this is a top team, the best team in the country at the moment. And despite a couple of injuries to big players, it's going to be a hell of a task to overturn it.
Yeah, I think Sam's right as well, because there are no away goals. So the important thing is staying in the. It's not conceding early like they did in the first leg, and then leaving yourself with, over the course of whatever amount of time. You've then got to score 3 goals at Arsenal, and Arsenal only lost 1 game at home this season so far. So that's a tall order. I think we'll probably see Reece James in there from the start, and probably in a midfield.
I agree.
In a midfield role. Alongside Caicedo, probably Fernandes, possibly Fernandes playing in the 10 and Pedro up front. But I think the emphasis is going to be on keeping it tight, trying to keep it quite narrow, but then getting out to Arsenal's wingers when you can, but trying to stop Arsenal using their wingers to stretch the pitch, and just staying in the tie. And he's already, actually, Rosenior has said that. He'd love to get the team selection right for the first half and the second half, but he has to guess results. And he's very much looking at probably the second half of this second leg to be where Chelsea can come strong. And I think if they go into that, if they go into the second half of the second leg still only 1 goal behind, or preferably from Chelsea point of view level, I think just maybe the starts playing on Arsenal's minds. And as Rosenior said, Chelsea have won big matches. Matches that really matter. I mean, whatever you say about Arsenal, we're still only in February. The matches that really matter now are the ones between now and May. But the Chelsea players have got experience of winning Conference League final and Club World Cup final, so they know what it takes to get over the line in these big games.
Do you think maybe that second half is where Cole Palmer comes into things? Obviously, was brilliant against Napoli, coming on from the bench. He didn't play the first leg of this. He also didn't play in the league meeting in November. Does that change how Rosenior approaches this game, given that he's available, he's been in really good form, and does it provide an opportunity for Palmer to really build up a bit of steam this season, because he hasn't really been able to with the injuries and whatnot that have hampered him a bit?
I think with Palmer is, it was a fantastic, can you say, is it a cameo when he comes on second half? It was he made the impact he made. You couldn't argue with the impact he made in Naples game. But then at the weekend, he wasn't quite on it again. And obviously, he played the full game in the end, or at least most of it, and moved out to the right after the changes. But it didn't really affect the game as much as he would like. I think, given it seems like they're still managing his time, and the fact that he's played 90 minutes, or the best part of at the weekend, I'd be surprised actually if he started against Chelsea. And I think, much like the game against Naples, it will be, as I said, if they're still in the tie at half time at your 60 minutes, I think that's when that's when you see Palmer come on and try and find a way through the Arsenal defence. Hopefully a tiring Arsenal defence, and just playing those little balls, or playing on the half turn in those spaces to try and break Arsenal down. I'd be surprised. I'll probably be absolutely completely wrong, but I think he'll be used again as an impact player, like as he was in Naples.
Yeah, it's a tough game really to predict this one because you just don't know what to expect from Chelsea, especially in big games. And Arsenal, as you mentioned, the best team in the country at the moment. They've been so solid defensively, but will Arteta make those changes? The likes of Kepa, will one of Gabriel or Saliba drop out? The last thing I'm going to ask you both to do is to give us a prediction for Tuesday's game.
Well, just on what Dan was saying there, I suppose the Cole Palmer thing's about Esteban if he comes back, because obviously he was probably Chelsea's best player, if memory serves, in the Arsenal game. He was a threat throughout, so he's got a bit of a conundrum there. Hopefully he's going to be fit to start. If he is, and I agree with Dan, Reece James in midfield, I think Gusto and Cucurella are probably doing the role they did in that second half, and making sure you solidify the midfield with two holders. That would be the way I'd go, and Chelsea will win 1-0 and win on penalty kicks.
Dan?
I think,
can't predict a defeat. With
my Chelsea, I think I can definitely say extra time.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, because we've been talking about the strength of the second string, and I just wonder whether Arsenal over 90 or 120 minutes of this will have too much on the bench, and and if they were to fall behind, then they can bring on Martinelli or Madueke or Gabriel Jesus or
Madueke goal, or
Kai Havertz. I mean, there's a lot of there's a few old boys who could do some damage, and it feels I don't know. And listen, I'm pessimist.
Kepa and penalties.
Pessimist and never disappointed. Well, Kepa on penalties in the Carabao Cup hasn't got a fantastic record from that final.
That's what we all want.
But I think I can see Chelsea, but I think I'd still give it probably 70-30 Arsenal, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm, as much as my heart wants to agree with Sam, my head unfortunately does agree with Dan. I just think Arsenal at home, Chelsea have not got a good record at all at the Emirates. The last time I went to the Emirates, Chelsea got beat, I think it was 5-0 with Kai Havertz walking away with man of the match. So really not overly optimistic, but I will be absolutely thrilled if Chelsea do manage to make it through to the final.
There's been the one win, is there not, in recent memory, the Lukaku game, when everything looked so rosy.
Everything looked like it was going to be amazing.
And he absolutely destroyed the two centre-halves, didn't he?
Yeah.
And that was probably the best we ever had.
That's the curse. It's the curse of the Chelsea number 9.
Yeah, indeed.
But yeah, that's unfortunately all we've got time for on this episode of the Chelsea Blueprint. Let us know your predictions for Chelsea against Arsenal tomorrow in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the Chelsea Blueprint. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.